I'm here because I lived through something that almost destroyed me, mind, body, and soul, and I don't want it to destroy anyone else. And I'm going to start off by giving you a brief little testimony about myself and then why I do what I do. Because my father took his life just before I was born. That caused me to seek male affirmation, but it also put a target on my back for very bad people. At a very young age, I was molested for the first of hundreds of times. And I'm talking about by trusted adults, two teachers. One was a part-time guidance counselor, a friend's father, family friends, and etc. And that abuse, it shattered something deep inside of me. So I had started to dissociate from self and I began seeking a new identity. I believed wholeheartedly and sincerely that I was a girl trapped in a boy's body. By age 13, I tried to end my life with pills. I overdosed. At age 14, I ran away from home and I became a prostitute on the streets, and I was sex trafficked, a trans-identified prostitute at that. I was lost, I was broken, I was desperate. I was seeking love, seeking acceptance, and seeking male affirmation. And that's why the LGBTQIA TransQueer movement saw me as one of its perfect candidates. So they told me that I really wasn't a boy, that I really was born in the wrong body. They promised me that if I had just transitioned, I would finally be happy, finally be loved. I could finally be my quote-unquote true self. So I did. And at 14 years old, I started wrong sex hormones. So for 20 years, I lived as a transgender quote-unquote woman. For over 30 years, I was a proud member and advocate of the movement itself. I breathed it, I lived it, I became it. I didn't just live a lie, I became the lie. I recruited others into it. But here's what they never told me, and what they're not telling anyone else, that it's all a lie. That the LGBTQIA movement that I gave my life to is, by definition, a cult. The movement targets children, confused, hurting, searching for identity. It grooms with pretty colorful flags, with pride parades, with social media influencers who say, be who you are. But it doesn't really make sense when you think about it, to be who you are by becoming someone that you're not, someone else. So behind that beautiful, colorful, bright, shiny, attractive flag is nothing but destruction. And it told me that I could change my sex. I destroyed my body with wrong sex hormones and procedures. It told me that this was liberation, when instead it led me into prostitution, into disease, despair, and near death. I contracted HIV/AIDS even as a 14-year-old child. I was the suicidal trans kid that you always hear about when someone is trying to push the TransQueer agenda. But what they don't tell you is that I then became a suicidal trans adult because transitioning, wrong sex hormones, diversity, inclusivity, and acceptance, they don't take away depression. They don't take away suicidal ideation or the trauma that you suffer, which caused the dissociative disorder to begin with. The LGBTQIA movement said that was just a part of being authentic, that all of those burdens were just a part of walking in the way. That lied. That was a lie. It was a lie from the pit of hell. And it told me that my feelings were my truth, but feelings change. Biology doesn't. It told me that opposing voices were bigots and haters. It told me that anyone who told me that I wasn't what I thought I was or what I felt I was just a transphobe or a homophobe. But the real hate was the LGBTQIA movement silencing anyone who says, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the answer, or wait a minute, maybe there's another way. This agenda has taken over schools. It's taken over classrooms, even some church buildings. It's taken over our government. Anywhere children gather, it's there. It pushes books and lessons that sexualize children early. But what would be the purpose of that? So that they would be easier to confuse and control. The plan always has been to target, to desensitize, to sexualize, and then victimize. Later, they'll be criminalized and weaponized. I've seen it destroy lives. I've watched friends die from the very death style that they celebrated and worshipped. I also almost died too. I remember when I was going to get my first surgery, which was castration, and I went to New York City, and a few days before the procedure, I was hanging out with two post-operative transgenders that I'd known them for about 10 years. I met them when I first ran away on the streets of Philadelphia. So I'd known them about 10 years, and I'd always idolized them. I always wanted to be them. They were beautiful. They always seemed happy and confident and content. And I wanted that joy, and I wanted that security. One of them, while we were sitting on the beach on Coney Island, one of them just looked at me out of the blue and said, "Don't do it." And he said, all of my life I thought that if I could just become a woman, that I'd find peace and joy and happiness. He said, now I'm medically and I'm legally a woman, and I'm more miserable now than ever before in my life, and I think of taking my life every day. The other one looked at me and said, I get on the subway several times a day, and each time that I see that train coming down the tracks, I think of stepping off the platform in front of it. Don't do it. You don't want to be us. So I didn't do it. I went back to my hotel and I cried myself to sleep, actually. But I remember laying there thinking, like, if this isn't going to bring me joy, then what will? What's my next step? If I'm not going to find peace and contentment in this path, what do I do now? My life was a mess, so I just continued on as a trans-identified person. And then in 2009, I ended up on my deathbed. I hadn't walked without a walker for over a year at that point, and I hadn't stood up straight for over a year because of osteoporosis, commonly known as an elderly woman's disease, but it's a bone disease that was directly caused by the wrong sex hormones. Not to mention, I was sterile at age 20. I had heart disease and thyroid issues by age 30, all directly related to the wrong sex hormones. But then something happened in my life that this movement or this cult could never explain. On my deathbed, I cried out to God in the middle of my brokenness. I asked Jesus the Christ to save me, and he did. He touched me, he healed me physically, he healed me mentally, he healed me emotionally, and he healed me spiritually. Even though I didn't have an earthly father, he let me know that I had a heavenly Father that loved me unconditionally. He showed me that my identity was never in my thoughts and feelings. My identity was never in my past traumas. My identity was not in my comorbidities or in some colorful flag or symbol. That my identity is found only in him, in Jesus the Christ. So I'm a man. I'm created by God as a man, and I'm free. I have detransitioned. I have left the cult. And now I spend my life warning other people. And the most important thing is, if you're struggling with same-sex attraction, with gender confusion, with bullying, with trauma, or with feeling like you don't belong, guess what? You're not alone. If you've been abused mentally, emotionally, sexually, physically molested, you're not alone. But the answer is not to let this lgbTQIA TransQueer movement define you, drug you, or mutilate you. The answer is truth, love, and healing. Believe me, I never knew that I would find happiness at the end of my path, and I've experienced true joy. Homosexuality and transgenderism are not who we are. They are things that happen to us. They are lies that we are told. They are behaviors that stem from some type of trauma or event. But the good news is that they are mutable and they are curable. I am living proof. You don't have to go through what I did. You don't have to lose your body. You don't have to lose your health. You don't have to lose your future or your soul, right? You have to know that there are your parents, there's teachers, and there's pastors who love you, and they are not your enemy. The lies of the lgbTQIA TransQueer cult are your enemy. And the agenda that wants to put kids and push children into irreversible decisions before their brains are even fully developed, that is danger. And if you're hearing me and you're already in it or deep in it, know that there's a way out. There's no such thing as too far gone. There really is peace, joy, and security that can be yours, and it can be yours today. So if you know someone who is enveloped by this, who's saturated in this, but aren't sure if what I'm saying is the real deal, right? You don't have to believe me, but if you truly love somebody who is wrapped up in that, then you will have to at least consider what I'm telling you could possibly be true. Because then you should be worried about Do you love them enough to find out what happened to them? Do you love them enough to figure out what you can do to help them?
So you mentioned the LGBTQIA movement a lot. Are there like specific people or like groups of people that you can narrow in on? Because that feeling broad.
So the movement itself is just a mass of political wickedness. There are people there, and I'm not talking about just people who identify into it or who run to it for comfort, um, or for acceptance or to belong. I'm talking about the ones that are pushing this agenda from levels beyond where I was growing up, beyond where any of you are. We're talking about people who are higher up, whether it be politics, whether it be positions, wherever they're at. This is a diabolical mass of political wickedness, and it has been unleashed, sadly, on the youth. And it's not anything new. I mean, it's not. It wasn't as bold in my day as it is now. It wasn't everywhere in my day like it is now. But it is still a movement, and there is still an agenda. And if anyone that actually goes to sit in state houses and listen to legislators when they try to pass bills, like California just passed a bill that oh gosh, I should know it by heart actually, because it has to do with children being able to engage in sexual activity with adults as long as they are within 10 years of age. And so you might want to look that up. That was a bill just passed over in California. And and so I'm not trying to I want people to understand. I don't know if your teacher showed you the five faces of wrong sex hormones, an illustration that I had sent to him. It's a photo of the same young woman in five stages of being treated, or what they call treated, but really it's being poisoned with testosterone, with wrong sex hormones. Wrong sex hormones and puberty blockers are synthetic poisons. They alter brain function and development. They alter their nervous system. They cause severe and maniacal mood swings. They cause rage, outbursts. They also cause irreversible damage to organs. They slow and stop some development of some systems and organs, and they, of course, your bones as well. So there's so much with this that we have to sit back and say, this isn't healthy. It can't possibly be healthy because humans can't change sex. This isn't an ethical stance. It's not a moral stand. This isn't me being philosophical or spiritual. This isn't my religious belief. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's not a myth. It's just the truth. It's not rude, insensitive, or unkind. It's just the truth. Human beings cannot change sex. Wrong sex hormones cause irreversible damage. These are things I know intimately.
Yes, I say this, I don't mean in any way to discount your experience, because obviously it was an awful thing that happened to you, and I think it does highlight like some issues with the LGBTQ community. But your experience is far from common or what's considered normal. The vast majority of people who are transgender or gay or whatever, the vast majority of people stay that way, and they're more content with their identity after the fact. So my question is, how are you so sure that what happened to you is what's happening to everyone, that it's hurting everyone and not just a small portion?
That's a very fair question. And so it's through my life knowledge and experience, as well as the life knowledge and experience of thousands of others. So, there's this big misconception that's been put out there about detransitioners being such a small number of those who have transitioned. That's not true. The fact is that these clinics and doctors that have marked these people down as happily transitioned do not change that status when they detransition or when they commit suicide. So some of them are no longer living. Many of them have detransitioned, but they are still marked down for statistic purpose as happily transitioned. I base everything that I say on not just my own life knowledge and experience. I mean, I was a part of it for over 30 years. I was deeply embedded. I mean, when I was trans identified, I used to represent nightclubs on floats in the pride parades. I was deeply embedded in this movement. But now that I'm out of it, I'm just as deeply embedded in wanting to see other people come out of it and be rescued from it and be helped.
So I know you talked a lot about with your own personal experience and with those your peers and that have had a lot of experience with trauma and then joining the trans movement. But what is kind of your stance? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, but on like homosexuality and like that idea, because I know like personally the people who I know who are part of that community have not had like serious and significant or like family like trauma, and especially the way you have, which is obviously horrible. So like what's kind of like your I guess like beliefs on like the homosexuality part of the lgbTQ movement?
So I think that homosexuality is a behavior, actually. I don't think that it's an orientation. I think it's a behavior. And I think that it's a behavior that's caused by some type of, not when I say trauma, it doesn't mean that they were beaten or raped or, molested, but some type of trauma or something. Even if it would be something as much as like being indoctrinated or something like that, which is what, I mean, now, back in my day, the majority of people that I knew, they were molested into it. They were physically abused and traumatized. But nowadays, it's pretty much from the time you start pre-K that it's being embedded into you. I think that if you love somebody enough, because I had a few people in my life that claimed to have a wonderful relationship with their mother and their father and had never been abused, and then later on down the line, a few years down the line in our relationship, they actually broke down and told me that they were traumatized, that they were molested, that they did have a horrible relationship with their father, something on those terms. So I like to put it out there that if you really truly care about somebody, that you would definitely try to get to know them well enough to be able to say what happened to you and how can I help.
Do you feel that people can go to therapy and others? I'm not necessarily sure I would use the term conversion therapy, but if basically it's a learned behavior, do you feel that it can be unlearned?
I do feel like it can be unlearned. Now, I'm not with conversion therapy. I know a lot of people who have been damaged by conversion therapy. And so for me, I look at it totally different. As a Christian, I say Jesus the Christ is conversion therapy. And just people say, well, I was born that way. And well, yeah, I believe that we're all born that way, whatever that is for us. But Jesus said to be born again. So if I think it's like, it's just who I am, Jesus said to deny self. There are things like, I'll tell you what, I met a young woman the other day. I went into Dunkin' Donuts and ordered my coffee, and she says, oh, I like your haircut. And she had a very short haircut and it was spiked up, and I could tell that she was trying, she was a little masculine in her appearance. And so I said, thank you. And I was like, and so it got to like the point where it was like, do you like my hair? And I said, you have such a beautiful face. I said, I just think you would look better if it wasn't, one, bleach blonde, but two, if it was a little longer. And she said, she just looked at me and she made a comment and she said, oh, guys always talk about my eyes but I'm gay. And I was like, okay, so I said, I used to be gay. And she's like, used to be. And we just got to talking, and I asked her a question. She said, you're a very attractive man for an old guy. You're attractive for an old guy. And I was like, well, thank you very much. But I said, let me ask you a question. When you see a man that you think is attractive and you see a woman that you think is attractive, do you see them the same way? And she said, no. I said, what's the difference? She said, when I look at the woman, I think about having sex with her. I said, that's not natural. It's not natural to look at somebody and think about having sex with them. There's a perversion there. That's lust of the flesh. There's something just unnatural about that. And so it didn't kill our conversation. She actually said, well, I never thought about it like that.
People in preschool are taught about homosexuality, and that's taught in schools. I was just curious what you meant by that, and like, where do you see that being taught in preschool?
Where do I see it? So far, I've seen probably about maybe 500 or 600 videos of pre-K teachers that are pushing this agenda, that are trans-identified, that are all over the internet, that are speaking out about how they're allowing their preschool and kindergarten classes to pick their gender by wearing a certain bracelet every day. They can be a he, a she, or a they, a them, a z, a zer. I mean, there's no end to it. And this is not something that you even present to children. it's dangerous. It's a dangerous ideology, and it's a very dangerous agenda. And so if you're not sure that it's being pushed onto children, or that it's being taught to children, basically, Massachusetts, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, was teaching third graders about oral and anal sex. So these aren't even natural sexual intercourse, but they're teaching them everything other than. So just do some research on it. I can guarantee you that you will find things in there that disturb you. If you do research on it, you will find things that disturb you about what's going on and about this agenda. And if you don't, then there's something wrong.
So you talked about this agenda a lot. What do you think is like, I know you're not like omniscient, but what do you think is like the motivation behind the agenda? Like, what are they trying to get out of it?
So there's a lot of theories out there. Mine is the one common denominator that I see in all of these theories is Big Pharma. Big Pharma basically is your government. Your government is Big Pharma. It's kickbacks constantly. Big Pharma is the one. So a few things people don't realize is that Big Pharma funds the trans rights organizations. Big Pharma also funds all of the trans clinics. And why would they do this? Why would Big Pharma be behind this? Well, because guess what? They're creating medical clients for life. With the trans issue, they're creating medical clients for life. You know, it's like biology is real. Okay, your body is not assigned to you. Puberty is healthy. It doesn't need to be blocked. It doesn't need to be paused. It's not a disease. It's not an issue. Puberty is healthy. We have to question the ideology that claims that sex is a spectrum or that it's changeable at will, right? Social pressure. I mean, peer groups, TikTok, schools pushing identities can amplify the distress that a lot of youth are in. Most teens feel awkward. I know I did. But just because they feel awkward or they want to belong doesn't mean that you normalize medicalizing them. Because these are irreversible decisions.
Why do you think people stopped questioning the idea of transitioning for like younger children?
So nobody has stopped questioning it. So all of the countries like Sweden, all of the countries that we modeled after and began transitioning children after they did, they've all stopped because they see that, one, no minor can fully consent to sterility, sexual dysfunction, or weakened bones. They can't consent to that. They can't consent to the irreversible damage that they're doing to their bodies. Therapy explores root causes. So if therapy can explore that, then why not get them therapy? Because hormones, so dysphoria, right? Just by definition, the DYS means an abnormal condition. Phoria means of mental confusion. So it's an abnormal condition of mental confusion. If it's a condition, then it doesn't need hormones, it needs healing. It needs to be corrected. It needs to be cured. It needs to be helped. And it needs therapy. And so no one has stopped questioning transitioning children. Many more doctors now, I guess they feel more comfortable stepping out and saying, yeah, this is not good for kids. I mean, look, I have osteoarthritis severely, all related to wrong sex hormones. And I was getting a procedure done to my hand. And I was sitting in the waiting room and I met a 19-year-old girl that broke my heart because she was walking with a walker, having had went onto testosterone for 4 years. 4 years. And she was walking with a walker. She couldn't stand up straight. Her bones were deteriorating. And all because she was going through something that she eventually came out of, that she eventually didn't, it resolved itself. Let me say it like that. You know, I think the message, like my message is really like your worth is not your identity label. All right. Youth need to develop resilience, skills, and relationships. And almost all gender distress, if left alone, will resolve itself. Almost all of it will naturally resolve itself if it's left alone, if they're not pushed into transitioning. I mean, it's scary that we even have to have that conversation. To think that children younger than 8 years old can be put on puberty blockers, which are experimental drugs, first of all. They were originally used to castrate dangerous predators, sex offenders. And then they started being used on cancer patients. But now they're being given to children to pause or block their natural, healthy process of puberty. We're halting brain activity and development. We're halting bone development. We're halting some of their organs from developing. I mean, if you take nothing from this, take that with you, that we are ultimately destroying children, sterilizing them, mutilating them, butchering them, experimenting on them. They're not lab rats. And having been one that was on wrong sex hormones at 14, I was a suicidal trans kid at 13. When I got on wrong sex hormones at 14, my suicidal ideation only got worse. And I ended up a suicidal trans adult.
Dave, let me ask a question, and this was what people often say, what people do with their own lives, that's their own business. It's not for me to judge. You do you. Why are we meddling in the lives of other people? It's their lives. How would you respond to that?
Well, pretty much probably the way I would respond to those that say, when I try to talk about the children, they say, I don't have any kids. So what? Does it not mean you don't want to help protect children? Do you not want to actually even investigate if what I'm saying is real? There's so many different people out there that say, well, I don't have kids, and I don't have kids either. But I literally put my life at risk, and if you think it's not a cult, if you think it's not, there's no agenda, then I would highly tell you to actually look at how many detransitioners like myself that speak out publicly receive actual death threats on a consistent basis. That's not normal. It's not just something that people are doing and nobody else cares. There's an agenda. Their children are being targeted. And gosh, I don't have any kids, and I can't see not doing what I'm doing. So I can't imagine people with children, or even if you have somebody in your life, if you have somebody in your life that's trans identified, or even that you think would be going down that road, you should want to know every piece of information you can find to be able to help them, and find out all the information you can about what they're going to do to their bodies if they begin transitioning. Because they may live a few years of this euphoria because they're getting accepted, and like any other drug, because they'll tell you what, I did cocaine in my past too, and when I would take cocaine I would feel really good and happy too. So when you take a drug, you're going to feel happy, but they're taking these drugs, they're receiving this acceptance, this inclusive acceptance, and it's going to cause them eventually down the road to recognize that they're still the same broken, confused, delusional people that they were before they started down that path. And it's only worse for them at that point.
So when you were talking, you mentioned that you grouped in homosexuality with transgenderism as a issue, as you say. Could you expand on your thoughts on that?
So I believe that homosexuality is a behavior. As one that identified as a homosexual first, and then after I detransitioned, I believe that it's a behavior, and I think that it's a behavior that stems from some type of trauma, not meaning that it has to be like rape or beaten or something like that, but it could just be something as simple as a disconnect with a father or a father figure or something.
So you said you found Christ. What's like your take on homosexuality now?
So he actually found me because I was lost. He wasn't lost, so I didn't find him. But my take on homosexuality is that it's a behavior. It's a behavior that is either learned or adopted because of misconceptions on intimacy between or relationships. So I'm not I don't beat my friends in the head that identify as homosexual and tell them, like, with scripture, because that's not how we're supposed to respond. But they know where I stand, and I'm always there for them. And I've seen a lot of people come out of even homosexuality. So that's where I stand on it. I stand on it that it is a behavior that can be unlearned. And I'm not talking about conversion therapy, because conversion therapy is garbage.
I was just wondering, so you mentioned that you don't like statistics and polls, but you also want us to do research. How would you recommend us to do research that avoids statistics?
Well, just the research of, like, look up the overhauling of straight America, right? It's an article, it's a piece that was put out by two activists, two lgbTQI activists. I don't really try to lead anyone into anything that's statistics or polls, because they're biased. They're biased. It doesn't matter who collects the data, they're biased in some way, shape, or form. So I've never been one on, for statistics or polls. But there is a lot of proof out there. There's a lot of evidence to be found out there, if you just look it up. Especially like the destruction that wrong sex hormones cause, right? Or puberty blockers. That's medical. There's medical proof out there. I mean, just think, like, doctors who go against the grain. This movement tries to silence them. I mean, like, just because you dissent, doctors, researchers, they dissent from this group, and they face censorship. I mean, that should tell us that there's stuff out there. We have to follow the evidence. Not activism. Follow the evidence. Don't follow the activism. It's like if you're on crack and you want to know if you can get off of crack, you don't go to your crack dealer. You find somebody who's gotten off of crack. So same thing for trans-identified people. If they want to know if it's possible to get past whatever their issue is, then they have to find people who have detransitioned.
So I was wondering, I have two questions, if that's okay.
That's fine.
So first of all, you said that you went on hormones at 14.
Yes.
Who let you do that? How did you do that?
So I ran away from home because my mother wouldn't. And the older transgenders that took me under their wing, they're the ones that helped me get on.
Do you think that there are some people who would agree with your position of, like, thinking transgenderism is bad, but who also have, like, hateful views towards trans people? And would you consider yourself to, like, hate trans people? And if not, how do you differentiate yourself from the people who do? Yeah,
there are people out there. There are people out there that hate people for various reasons, right? No, I don't hate anybody. I actually have friends that are that identify as homosexual. I have friends that identify as trans. I have befriended and established relationships with people throughout my last 16 years of being out of it, with many people. And I have watched a lot of people detransition and a lot of people come out of that world. And if they don't, I don't unfriend them. I don't block them. I remain in their life because I truly care about people. Big Pharma, the big pharmaceuticals, a lot of people don't realize that. Big Pharma is your government. Your government is Big Pharma, because all of your government legislators and spokesmen get kickbacks from Big Pharma. It's just the way it is. It's an evil, wicked thing to be involved in. But Big Pharma also funds all of the trans rights organizations. Big Pharma funds all of the trans clinics. And so why would they do that? Because they're creating medical clients for life. With this whole transgender ideology alone, they are creating medical clients for life.
It's kind of like a thing on, like, social media or, like, back and forth. Like, do you think that, like, being part of the lgbTQ community is like you're saying it's a learned thing, like people aren't born with it, like it's you choose to be lgbTQ? Is that what, like, your stance is?
So it's kind of hard to say it's a choice, because I don't feel like I would have made that choice as a child. But I think that it is. I don't think behaviors are choices. I think that behaviors are learned, or some behaviors can be a trauma response. And so I think that there's a disconnect somewhere along the line, and it's about intimacy. I think that we are created to have intimate relationships, same-sex intimate relationships, but intimacy doesn't mean sex. Sex is not intimacy. They're two separate things. Intimacy is what a father and a son would share, what two brothers would share, or a grandfather and his grandson. And I think that somewhere along the line that gets blurred, and then society and culture come along and tell that person that if they have that desire for same-sex intimacy, that must be an attraction, and if it's an attraction, then it has to be romantic and or sexual. And just to give you a quick example is I had befriended a man, and we were just very good friends, and we used to go hiking and walking and hang out together and talk a lot. And it's one day out of the clear blue, he said, wow, he said, you know what? I think that you filled a void within me. He says, and I'm not like that. I used to have to look to sex to fill that void, and it never filled that void. He says, but now I've experienced what a real relationship with a man is like without sex, and that void was filled. And so he kind of got to recognize that it wasn't an attraction, that it was just a desire for some intimacy. Like if you're struggling with same-sex attraction or gender confusion or bullying or trauma or feeling like you don't belong, guess what? You are not alone. If you've been abused or molested, whether it's physical or mental, emotional, or sexual, you're not alone. But the answer is not to let the LGBTQIA movement define you, drug you, or mutilate you. The answer is found only in the truth, in love, and in healing. And so these things, they're not who you are. They are just things that happen to you, or they were lies that you were told. They're behaviors that stem from some type of trauma or event. They're trauma responses. But I can promise you that they're mutable and they're curable. And I can promise you that because I'm living proof. And I've known over the last 16 years of doing this ministry, I've known thousands who also have been cured and who can tell you that it's mutable, and they've walked away from it and they've detransitioned, or they've come out of that darkness. And so, like, you don't have to go through what I did. Nobody does. Nobody has to lose their body, lose their health, or their future, or their soul. And know that there are parents and teachers and pastors out there who love you, and they're not your enemy. The enemy are the ones that lie to you, right? The enemy are the ones that tell you that you're something that you're not. And the agenda that wants to usher children into irreversible decisions before their brains are even fully developed. That's the enemy. That's the danger. And so if you're hearing this, right, and you've already, maybe you're deep in it, maybe you're there, there's a way out. And that's the message. There's a way out, and there's no such thing as too far gone. There really is peace and joy and security at the end of the path, as long as you take the right path. But what I was able to find out was that transitioning was not going to bring that joy and that peace and that happiness. And so everyone around me thought that I was happy, I was content, I was secure. But I wasn't. I was depressed. I was angry. I was suicidal. And so nobody knew that. And nobody ever sat down and says, what happened to you? How can I help you? Nobody ever did that.
I'm sure this has probably happened, but if you've been accused of being homophobic or transphobic, what is your response to that?
So, like, the words alone, transphobic, xenophobia, homophobia, they're all just propaganda. And like, usually it's just young activists or people who are emotionally driven to use those words. They don't hold any water with me, those words. They're just propaganda. Because I know I don't hate anybody. I'm not afraid of anybody. So I can't be a homophobe or a transphobe. I'm just trying to tell them the truth because of my own personal life knowledge and experience. I think that we've all been groomed in so many different ways that when somebody just speaks like direct, it's taken as aggressive, and then they have to be some kind of phobe, or they have to be a hater or a bigot or something, and sometimes that's just not the truth. Propaganda is just that, propaganda. I mean, I hear youth all the time. I go to school board meetings, I go to the State House and speak and testify, and I hear youth all the time get up and say all of these things that are just propaganda, and it's what they've been force-fed by this movement, and they're just regurgitating it. And so it's kind of like, it's just propaganda. My heart breaks for them because they've been duped, they've been bamboozled into this belief system, and I just hope that they can come out of it. And if anything that I might be able to say or do someday could help that along a little faster, I'm all for it.
You just mentioned big pharma. Could you elaborate why you feel it? So the big pharmaceutical companies, why are they a main driver?
So big pharma and government are like almost one and the same. Your legislators and government, they receive kickbacks from big pharma, which are why they vote on specific bills. And you're like, why would they vote that way? It's because they received a kickback. But big pharma also funds all of the trans rights organizations. Big pharma also funds all of the trans clinics, especially the trans clinics for children. And why would they do it? Because they're creating medical clients for life. So it's not like they're doing it because they care. They're doing it because they're creating medical clients for life. Because these individuals, once they start transitioning, they will be on pharmaceuticals for the rest of their life, unless they stop and get off and just reverse what they can. Like me, osteoporosis to osteopenia, I still have bone disease. It's still bone density, but I've helped it get better with supplements and with working out and exercise. My heart disease, I have improved that with exercise and eating right. And so it's, there are things that we can do to break away from big pharma, but we have to be willing to do it. I believe is that one day that there are going to be many, many, many people that hang their heads in shame when they realize the evil that they defended and the heroes that they ridiculed. I truly believe